Shabbos Parshas Boy, this week's Shabbos. Today's Hey Shvat. The Mamar was delivered on the 5th day of Shvat. The year was Tafshin Memalef. It was the winter of 1981. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aaron Gomer. God speaks to Moshe and Aaron. This is the beginning of the 12th chapter of the book of Exodus. Debro el Kaladas Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of Israel. Leimer saying, בעשור לחודש הזה, on the 10th day of this month, ויקחו להם איש שא, each person will take a sheep. והיה לכם למשמרת, and then it will be under your watch, you'll guard it, עד 14 יום לחודש, until the 14th day of this month. And after that, ושחטו עשי, then it will be slaughtered, or you will slaughter it, etc. ויקחו את הבשר בלילה הזה, and you'll eat the meat on this night. Okay, that's a synopsis of a whole bunch of psukim. V'tzarech lahavan, we have to understand. Mahu inyan sheberesh chodesh nitztavu. What's up with this business that on Rish Chodesh, which is the first day of the month, we got a commandment shebe'asar lachodesh that on the 10th day of the month yikhu es haseh. Why didn't God come to Moshe Rabbeinu and say, tomorrow we'll take a sheep? You needed a 10-day heads up. That's a big heads up. You go to Sheep Saras and you buy a sheep, and that's it. What's the problem? Will be a dalad bay, and then you have to have 4 days to keep the sheep under guard, and on the 14th day, yishchatu, then you have to slaughter it. Ubetezvav bay, and then on the 15th day, yechlu. So there's actually an interesting dispute with the Rishonim if you have to check the sheep for 4 days before. According to the Tosfos, you have to have the sheep ready 4 days before. You have to keep checking it. Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says you buy the sheep and you go for it, right? But certainly there's no mitzvah of taking the sheep and making this whole big ceremony out of it. That's clearly something that was unique to the Exodus, to Pesach Mitzrayim. And this is the big question, to understand how this unfolds and why it unfolds in this fashion. It's interesting to note that the Mamar does not follow the syntax of Mamar of the previous Rabbi. It's just a broad, general opening about why do we have to have this business where God speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu on Rosh Chodesh, take the sheep on the 10th, and then bring it on the 14th. And the Rebbe says that we'll be able to understand this, but Bahagdim, he first is going to preface something that Kvei Kedushas Admor Tzemach Tzedek brings in Eretz Torah. And the thing he's quoting from Eretz Torah is not really a Mamar. It's not. It's like a manuscript on Zohar, which reconciles various expressions in the Zohar which are hard to understand. So we learned in the Zohar be'asar lachodesh. It says on the 10th of the month. Amai be'asar. Why in the 10th? So the Rebbe now, quoting the Tzemach Tzedek, explains the Zohar. Pirush dahava l'leimer be'asiri lachodesh. It should have said, in using the normative Hebraic syntax, on the 10th of the month. A maiksiv be'asar. Doesn't say be'asiri, it says be'asar. So it's a very nuanced thing. It's like a missing yud. We don't say be'asar, we say be'asiri. So why do we say be'asar? And he says, again, this is synoptic conflation of a whole bunch of things, but the Tzemach Tzedek comes to the conclusion that asar pirushehu asiri bovad. She'einhu asiri bovad. It's not just the 10th. Elu koilol es kol ha'asara. That be'asar says in the 10, not on the 10th. On the 10th is on the 10th day. Be'asar means on the 10th, meaning as if with the 10th. So it's the full 10 days that are required in order for us to bring this korban. Understand the difference? Not on the 10th day, but with 10 days. There's something about 10 days that unfolds from the time of the commandment to the actual taking of the sheep that together completes a process. We're talking here about a 10-day process, not something that's just done on the 10th day, divorced from the 9 days that preceded. That's kind of the conclusion of what the Tzemach Tzedek draws. He cross-references 4 different statements in the Zohar, and he uses the explanation of the Migdash Melech to reach a certain point, and then Tzemach Tzedek himself comes in and says, okay, so this is what it really means. That's essentially what happens there, without going into more details. So the Rebbe says, okay, let's try to understand this. The simple answer, if somebody wants a simple answer, says, so why did they have to take it on the 10th day? They didn't. They had to take it with 10 days. Over the course of 10 days, this commandment had to be given. I guess they had to ruminate, they had to settle, and then they had to come to the conclusion, do what Hashem said. Over the course of 10 days, the animal had to be taken. So by the 10th day, the animal was actually there, tied to the bedpost. But that happened, it concluded, it climaxed on the 10th day. It was something that took 10 days to process. That was the original question. Why'd you have to get a commandment on Rosh Chodesh, and then you have to wait until the 10th day to do it? So the Rebbe says, no, that's not the case. You have to do it over 10 days. So it started, a process that started on Rosh Chodesh with a commandment, and only at the end of the 10th day, when we reach the 10th day, that's when everything was in place.
So they were given a due date?
No. A due date means you got to do it by this day. Doesn't matter what you do the days in between. You can wake up a half hour before the due date. They were given a mission to do over 10 days. And so you have 10 days to do this. And it's something which can't be done in a day. But over the course of 10 days, by the time 10 days comes to an end, this is where we should be up to. What is that? We don't really know what that is. Right now it's just like, okay, fine, that's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. Be'aser is not Basidi, it's Be'aser. That's what the Zohar is getting at. Why? What does that mean to do? Why do you have to do something over 10 days? Taking a sheep takes 5 minutes. It doesn't take 10 days. So for this, the Rebbe sets out no beer inyan. To better understand this, like all the Mamar and Chassidus, we don't get now quick jingles. Now we're going to get a retreat into, let's step back for a moment. Let's understand the whole big picture here in a different way. And once we understand what's going on here, and we have a clear appreciation of what was Rosh Chodesh Nisan and what was being, so to speak, expressed to the Jewish people, we'll understand why it was something that had to be done over 10 days rather than on the 10th day. The servitude of the Jewish people during the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of leaving the land of Egypt, what was their calling? Maybe it's a better word than servitude. What did Hashem ask? What was their spiritual vocation? What was expected of them? What was their mandate? And the answer is Lifal Inyan Shal Chidush Ba'ilam. They had to bring novelty into the world. What does this mean? This is the notion of Chodesh Shal Geula, the month of redemption. Geula Migalas Mitzrayim, a redemption from the narrow constrictions that is Egypt, that is Mitzrayim. V'aveda zu, and the aveda of breaking free from the things which constrict, inhibit, and disable, the things which restrain, this aveda, this mandate, this calling began on Rosh Chodesh. V'achar kach nimshecha merish Chodesh l'chol yemei hachodesh. From Rosh Chodesh, it went to all the days of the month. Ukemevur b'Likutei Torah, as the Alter Rebbe explains Likutei Torah and in Ateres Reish of the Mittler Rebbe, many places in Chassidus, and you heard this from me many times. The Masha Nikra b'Shem Rosh Chodesh, the fact that it's called head of the month, v'lo tchilas hachodesh, not the new month, as they say in English, or beginning of a new month, hu lefi shehu bedugmas hareish, because it is paradigmatic of the head. Shabay klulim kol hakayches shabay evrei aguf. All of the faculties, the powers, the wherewithal, the ability of the entire body is essentially found in the head, in microcosmic fashion. But the brain controls everything. So every ounce of brain cell has a huge impact on many, many ounces of flesh, sinew, and bone throughout the body. In fact, every tiny area of the brain, and God forbid, if there's small damage to the brain, it will result in enormous damage to the rest of the body, or to a big part of the body. This is the faculties as they're found in the various limbs of the body, but before they've actually become animated into those limbs. So, for example, a person could get, God forbid, a brain injury and lose the ability to see, because it's a part of the brain that controls that area of the body. And it's a very small part of the brain. You would say the guy has nebach, terrible mazel. You had to get hit exactly in that spot, and that spot was impaired. This is the science of neurology. Hemorrhaging, or other forms of stroke. And then it affects different parts of the body, different functions. And even after the various faculties and abilities and strengths of the body now become animated into the various organs, it's all in the head. It's all in the head. Dal derech zeh ober Rosh Chodesh. The same thing is true about Rosh Chodesh. Shabei klulim avodas kol yemei chodesh. Whatever it is that's going to be required for you to do in a particular month would already be in Rosh Chodesh. So you better use Rosh Chodesh well. Rosh Chodesh is a really important day because just like Rosh Hashanah affects the whole year, Rosh Chodesh affects the whole month. That's why we prepare. Ready the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, we have a Shabbos of Varchim, and we recite Tillim, and we have a Farbrengen, and we try to get ourselves in gear for Rosh Chodesh. And then Rosh Chodesh we have added prayers, and we read the Sefer Torah, and we're supposed to learn certain things. And all this is to make sure that Hashem gives us a Chodesh which is filled with bracha. And then when you utilize the Chodesh as it's supposed to be, that it necessarily impacts the entirety of the month, all its days. Now it's understood, going back to our particular subject, because all of this is broadly applicable to Rosh Chodesh at large, but going back to Rosh Chodesh Nisan and the Jewish people's calling, when the time came to leave the land of Egypt, it's understood that the beginning of it all starts on Rosh Chodesh. If there's going to be an exodus, if there's going to be a transformative event in which the Jewish people will no longer be a slave nation in the bowels of another nation, but instead be born, as it says in the writings of our sages, K'ubar hanishmat, like a baby who just suddenly comes into his own and literally is birthed, if that's going to happen this month, already on Rosh Chodesh, you're going to have an enormous amount of power and influence in that direction. It's understood it already started Rosh Chodesh. Then it went into the days of the month until Lahudis. Incidentally, this is how the Rebbe explains elsewhere the question of the Haggadah. I would think already from Rosh Chodesh you could begin to observe Pesach. No, it's on that day. So the Rebbe explains, Rosh Chodesh already is the hamshacha of everything that's going to happen during the actual events of the Exodus. So I would think, since it already comes in Rosh Chodesh, you could already observe Pesach. So no, you got to wait till that day. Why B'Yom? You see, on that day, bringing carbon Pesach. There's already activities that are Pesach related. So it's already Talmud Leimer B'Alai Be'erev. No, B'Alai has to be at night. The drawing forth from Rosh Chodesh to all days, these days would be called, for lack of better terminology, increments of time, segments of time. And all time is segmented. And all time necessarily is trapped within the limitation of kedima ve'ichur. There is something called progression, past, present, and future. There's the inexorable march of time, what we call Ovar, Hoive, Ve'asid, the past, the present, and the future. So each and every moment of time has to be seen on its own, along a continuum. I think that the best metaphor for this is the good old-fashioned strip of film, in which each box is actually a moment in time. And it's only when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of boxes, one after the other, all that are placed on a strip, and they're shown in a certain speed, that all of a sudden you get a motion picture. Because you're sewing together, or having appear in very quick succession, many different little pictures, or many different frames of time, nanoseconds of time. And that's how the early films, they look like Charlie Chaplin, because it's not as sophisticated. And now we have HD. Now we have nanoseconds, and nanoseconds being divided into nanoseconds. They can't even manufacture film that's so precise. It's all on the computer today. It's all virtual, because physically it's impossible to create that kind of plastic. The plastic will have so many different pictures, one after the other. You wouldn't be able to roll it up on a strip. So kol yema v'yema ovid avidate. The point is that each day has its particular calling. Every day has something it's supposed to accomplish in it. That's the nature of time. Time is these frames in which we're supposed to get certain things done. We have responsibilities. This does not mean it doesn't mean that the efforts of the first day, for example, are only applicable on the first day. Rather, Time is necessarily seen and understood as a continuum. No frame of time is independent of the other frames of time. It can't be. It doesn't make any sense. Everything you do now will necessarily impact what happens afterwards. And one thing leads to the next. There's a quick succession, the cadence of moments that one follows the other. Ki b'chol yom, each and every day, yesh le b'shleimus, gam es ha'avedas hayomim sha'avru. Each day you have the perfection, the completion of everything that you did prior. So I can't do what I'm doing now without the days that preceded this. If I would have learned more, I would be able to give you even a better share. But I didn't learn more, unfortunately. So I'll give you only a mediocre share. Because everything I'm doing now is on the basis of what I've done already. And that's how it is. Everything we do is building on what you did before. The person who's an expert and a professional at doing something, how did he become an expert and a professional at doing that? From doing it again and again and again. And the more it's done, that's how good you get. There's a silly story of a person, a company, and they bought this machine, this huge machine that costs a tremendous amount of money, and on a certain day the machine stops working. And nobody knows what to do, and they call engineers from all over. And they said, there's one engineer who will be able to figure this out. But he has to come from the other side of the world. He lives down under. You have to take him from Australia all the way to Canada. He could figure this out. So the guy was brought out there. And of course it's a huge amount of money to bring this. Comes there and he walks around the machine and listens here and listens there and taps here and taps there. It goes on for about 20 minutes, takes out a little hammer, goes to a particular part of the machine, gives 3 quick bangs, and the machine starts working again. And then the bill is $27,000. So he says, $27,000 for 3 bangs? The guy says, no. It's $3 for each bang. However, it's $26,997 for the hundreds of hours or thousands of hours of training that I could walk in and figure out what's going on. And that's how it is. You pay for expertise. This is everything we're doing is based on what was done before. This is necessarily how you have to see time. And this is along the lines of what Avraham Avinu said, who was, by the way, the Rosh La'avis. He was the head of the patriarchs. And just like we have a head of the days, we have a head of the patriarchs. And it says, Echad Hay Avraham. Avraham was so unique, so special that Ezekiel called him the one. He was the guy. And it says about Avraham, and we know if it says about Avraham, it's applicable to all of us. Because everything follows, just like time, everything follows the opening of time. Everything follows in Nefesh, the opening, the first great hero, which is Avraham Avinu. Avraham, it says, was a zaken. He was old. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to know that he was old. He was old. But the Torah says, you should know that he was Baba Yamim. He was coming on in his days, which doesn't seem to make much sense because it's actually redundancy. He was old and he had many days. The Zohar explains, though, that Yoimin Hayu, Yoimin Shleimin. Yamav Hayu, his days were perfect days. In other words, Avraham Avinu was a person who didn't waste or lose a single moment of time. Everything he was supposed to do was exactly in place. And therefore, at any particular time in Avraham's life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be because he had all the moments of time previously fully utilized. The reason that we're not doing everything we could do now is because we didn't do everything we could do before. Think of the butterfly effect idea in your own personal life. He's the beginning, the Reish. If he's the father, then his job is to bequeath, pass that on to us. So we should also have this idea, or we should be able to strive for it. V'gam ksiv bei beferish, it says clearly, ki odaitiv, Hashem says, I love this guy Avram. Do you know why? L'man asher yitzava, because he instructs. Who? He instructs Banov, there's Beisai, his progeny, his household Achrav, v'shamru derech Hashem, and they guard and watch the way of Hashem. In other words, the Rebbe says, first of all, if he's a father, he necessarily bequeaths whatever he has to us. But furthermore, the Torah actually identifies God's love for Avram because he passes it on. He didn't keep it for himself. And the Rebbe puts in the brackets here that a derech is lahamsha b'chinas havaya. The word derech havaya means that the highway of taking the loftiest levels of Havaya, which represents a very deep and profound level of God's essence, lamata mata, bringing it down in the lowest of levels. Translating it, explaining it, articulating, expressing it in the realm of real time, in everyday life. And here's the interesting thing, that there's this mashal chassidus about a derech, about a highway, that a derech ha'amitis, me'licha me'apalta shamelach, ad lapina achira. That if it's really a road, the road doesn't go only a particular segment. Traveling the whole road means you can go from the palace down to the most rural areas, straight through, like Bathurst Street, or is it Young Street, the straightest road in the world, right? Goes all the way from the lake, all the way, I don't know, into the wild frozen yonder, somewhere up north. Does it go to Thunder Bay or something?
Minnesota.
Huh?
Thunder Bay in Minnesota, then Minnesota.
But Young Street goes to Minnesota?
Yeah, Highway 11.
It skirts
Goes
the...
through Thunder Bay, and then around Lake Superior, and it ends at the border with Minnesota.
Wow. Anyway, it's a very long highway. You start at one end, and you end up somewhere very far on the other end. That's really the point of a highway. So the highway is the connecting point. How will you get from point A to point B? The answer is the highway, the roadway, the pathway. And this is all about lasses tzedakah. It's about expressing it in acts of kindness in this world. Now it's moving to Avram Avinu, Olav Shalom Heidish L'chol Yisrael. He bequeathed this to all of Israel. What did he bequeath? He bequeathed everything. Because when you bequeath, you don't bequeath partial things. And therefore, he gave this idea of Baba Yamim. He gave this idea of coming with full days, meaning the utilization of time in the fullest sense. Now, he can't give you your full days. You need to claim your days for yourself. The point is, every one of us can do this. We can utilize the time. We don't have to waste time. Nobody's forcing us to waste time. We have the strength not to waste our time, to utilize the moments that Hashem gives us, each as a gift that should be fully utilized. Come with Yom Shleiman. As we see, in a very, very practical sense. If Sunday is well, if you have a good Sunday, you have a good Monday. If somebody didn't get what he's supposed to get done on one day, then the next day is missing. Why? Because everything from your to-do list on this day now jumped onto the next day, and it wasn't taken care of. That's a problem. We did it already. Now going back to the original point, the question was, what do you mean this has to be done over 10 days? And the answer is, that's exactly the point. Sanctification of time, the mitzvah of sanctifying time means that you sanctify all of your time, the entirety of time, because time is a continuum. So if I utilize the first day, then the second day will be the way it should have been. So if Moshe Rabbeinu told us take it on the 10th day, he didn't say, do whatever you want, but make sure you wake up, set a timer, set an alarm, so that on the 10th day you get this done. He said, start it now, so by the 10th day it'll be in place, because the 10th day is a continuum of all the days that precede it. And where did it begin? Where was the launching pad? Rosh Chodesh. That's the Ba'asor LaChodesh. V'loi be'asiri, not in the 10th day, because this day includes all the days that come prior to it. We're really, unfortunately, out of time, but basically the Rebbe goes on to explain that the concept of the Rosh Chodesh is the notion of the glimmer of growth. That the growth of a new month starts with a glimmer. It starts with a tiny, just literally a line of light, as we learned previously. And this line of light then develops and grows. The moon waxes each day. And the Rebbe says that, spiritually speaking, the moon represents the concept of Malchus. So the birth of Malchus. Malchus is the 10th of the Sfiris. But then you need something called Binyan HaMalchus. Malchus means responsibility. Malchus means to take hold, take charge of something. You be the leader, you be the ruler, you be the mother of it. You make it happen. And it takes time for it to develop. Malchus has to have with what to work. If you don't have brains and you don't have a heart and you're not able to function, no Malchus in the world, you come to a person who's inept and incapable and say, here, it's your responsibility. Look at you quizzically. What do you want me to do? I don't know how to do anything. So, but a person who's capable and then is given responsibility takes the capabilities they have and runs with it. This is the number 10, represents the 10 spheres. It starts with a glimmer. It starts just with the beginning of Malchus, with the appearance of the moon, but then the moon has to grow. And the moon grows over those 10 days. So when those 10 days are finished, we're ready for the concept of the Korban Pesach. That's the taking of the sheep on the 10th month. And the emphasis here is it has to be done in the right way. You have to start with a glimmer, start with a sliver, start with bittul. Rebbe goes on to explain that when you start with bittul, when you start just with a little bit, a small thread of light, that enables you to grow afterwards. But a person starts off, it's all about me, then it doesn't work. It's like the story to tell of the fellow who came and interviewed for a job, And he said, could I have the job? He said, we're considering it. He said, what's the pay? He said, well, you'll have a starting salary of $37,000. Within 5 years, you could build yourself up to a $100,000 salary. He says, that's wonderful. He says, when would you like to start? He says, in 5 years. And it doesn't work that way. You have to get there. That's the point that's being made here. You have to get to the 10th day. You have to get to the 5 years. You have to get to the 10th day. And getting to the 10th day means there's the birth of Malchus, and then the development of Malchus, and that means eventually the power of being able to take Korban Pesach and engender the Geula, the Exodus from Mitzrayim. And of course, the upshot of this whole Mamar in the end is that the continuation of time from the very beginning, from HaChodesh Zalachem, from the birth of Geula, is that we should finally reach the conclusion, the climax, the sweet ending with the coming of Mashiach b'mheira u'b'yameinu amen. Thank you all for joining us all week. Have a wonderful Shabbos.